Welcome to episode 1 of season 5 of the Waking Up to Money. The title of today's show, or the sort of focus, was how do you set positive intentions around money? And it's the beginning of the year, and it's all about resolutions and goals and being a new you and blah 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 blah. And so part of it,
I think that's really getting into the spirit of January, isn't it? Blah 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 blah.
We know by mid-January, by next week, maybe 1st of February, you'll be like, oh, okay, I can't.
That does slightly undermine the theme for this show, doesn't it?
No, but this is why we're going to drop the knowledge bombs to help you just really set those positive intentions that last the whole of the year. And that's why I was talking about
big ask.
That's why I was thinking about intentions, because it's something it's been quite, how do I put it? It's been on my radar a lot within our community and with various people in our community who talk about themes, intentions, essentially less about specific goals and more about maybe an energy that you want to bring to something. It's basically creating more possibility to see how you can actually move forward, whatever goals whatever projects you have, whether it's a business project or, and in this case, around money and around pricing. And so I think the contrast I wanted to explore, well, in my head, there's one angle where I know I've been told Alan Wick, a good friend of ours, coach, he's been really, insistence the wrong word, but he's really stressed the usefulness of having a target, a goal. How much do you want to earn in this year? And I remember him just saying, it's like, what is that figure? And I'm just like, I have no clue. I have no idea. I don't have no way of working, because like I could reach high and say yes, hundreds of thousands, yeah, amazing, but that doesn't mean anything to me. Or I could say, oh, just cover the basis, make sure I can keep a roof over our heads and pay the mortgage and food and blah blah blah, but that's not particularly inspiring. And so on the course, the Happy Pricing course, which we have to plug every single bloody episode now, because otherwise why are we doing this in the first place? Where I was going with this is that we know that pricing is hard. We know that we can teach all the theory and tactics and strategies, you can read all the books, but when the sort of pedal hits the metal, the rubber hits the road, blah blah blah, when it really comes up to it and you're standing in front of someone and you have no idea how much to charge them, and then you have to work out how to have this conversation, then you're going to be like, well, how much do you think? Which is not particularly helpful. And I think there's something there around not knowing what you need or what you want. And that's where, the question that you pose on the course, what will more money buy you, I think is linked to this idea. And I was trying to how you link it to intentions that then can lead to tangible ideas of what it is that you want from more money. So yeah, that was a start for 10.
Well, that is more than a starter for 10. That was like a sort of starter for 100, wasn't it? There's many themes in there. And you kind of asked me before we started recording whether I had some sort of thoughts, how I was feeling about today's episode, and whether I had some thoughts. And what I didn't say at the time was I didn't really have any specific thoughts. I think I made more positive noises than that. But certainly one of the thoughts that I had, I know we titled this episode how to set positive intentions around money. And actually, I think a lot of what you were sort of sharing there about, whether it's better to kind of focus on themes, whether it's better to focus on sort of specifics, there's obviously a huge amount of kind of sort of debate and conversation and sort of different points of view around that. And I guess one of the things which I've been thinking about before is why it's important to set positive intentions around money. And as you say, it does definitely link to the kind of element on the course, this kind of idea of kind of more money manifesto and what you were sort of talking about, because I think actually changing our sort of relationship to money, changing how we price, changing the conversations that we have with clients is actually really hard. And so, maybe we've got to the place where we're having a conversation with the client and we kind of duck out of it at that point, like you're sort of talking about. But more often than not, actually, we kind of disengage with it way back down the track. We don't even get that far. It's not like we've got all the way up to the point of the conversation and then we sort of swerve the money bit, although that happens too. I say, a lot of the time, actually, it's just we avoid the money way up the track. And because it's kind of complicated and it's kind of filled with all of that kind of emotional baggage which we bring to it, and we're kind of worried about what other people might say, we're worried about what other people might think, we're worried about what is, what we're worth and what's valuable, and we're worried about asking for too much and all of these sorts of things which kind of sort of flood in and mean that we don't actually ever really get to the place of really kind of working on this, because changing your pricing and changing all of these things is a practice, like we're sort of talking about, it's a little and often thing. There's no kind of magic wand. It's a kind of little and often practice. And so I guess the kind of question, why set positive intentions around money is that it does give you a different orientation. It does give you a new direction of travel. And the thing that we're talking about on the course, this kind of idea of kind of more money manifesto, is this kind of, it's just kind of reconnecting with the things that, because money in and of itself is a kind of really terrible, in my view, a kind of weak motivator. It can pull you so far, but actually its kind of pull beyond that is pretty weak. We're motivated by other things. We're motivated by people we might want to spend time with. We're motivated by places we might want to go, or things we might want to do, or things we might want to kind of share with other people, or things that we might want to make kind of possible, or things we might want to do with children or without children if you have children in and around your life, or things, where you live or the place that you live. These are all things which actually we kind of care about. And so it's the kind of what we do with who we do it are the things that really kind of motivate us. And in that sense, kind of money is a facilitator. Money is a thing which can make those things possible. Money can, of course, sort of change the environment that you live in. Money can, of course, mean that you can go to places that you want to go to. Money, of course, it can mean all of these things, but it's a facilitator. It's not an end in itself. And so I think one of the things which I've always kind of found kind of both a kind of helpful orientation and motivation is be clear on those things. Be clear on all of the other things that I want to, I would ideally like to happen in my life, the things that I kind of really want, and then kind of understand that money is a facilitator of that, but be focused on those things, be motivated by those things, because they're the things that really kind of pull you forward. And then from those things, you might start to get an idea about the amounts of money that you might need to make all of those things happen. And so then you get the kind of benefit of a kind of fixed target within that too.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm glad you kind of tackled the why. I think it's important to kind of set the scene around the meaning of even talking about how you set positive intentions, why, the importance of it. Frances nicely, clearly stated what more money could mean for her. Childcare, facials, better internet, money for posh retreats, professional accountability space. And what I'd like to take that further with as well is even that for me, sometimes identifying what are the things I want. You talked about, okay, with Alan, all right, what's the figure? And then the figure that is essentially a manifestation of all the things you want. If you had those things that you want and you added up the numbers to get those things, okay, that's the figure, that's the target. And the target is useful as a benchmark, as something that helps you define progress. And just brief tangent, the flip side, and I think when you're talking about money as just getting money for its own sake is not a great motivator. I think sometimes that very clear number, that clear target, it's sometimes its origin isn't necessarily from what you want, it's what you think you should be at because of other people having certain salaries, certain amounts of money in their bank, or this idea of how much is a good amount of money to have, and how that can be a danger because you're now motivated by something that isn't yours. You're motivated by something else, and that can be draining. And so thinking about these things that we want, which is great, which again, I found difficult because I wasn't sure, why did I want those things? What is it about those things that are important to me. And this is where the how bit for me starts to fit in, because it's, and this I think is linking to a lot of the stuff that we do in the Happy Startup School. And I think one of the core things that we talk about is what are the needs beneath the wants. These things that we articulate that we want are strategies to address a need. And I see, again, picking on Francis, but for instance, I don't know, professional accountability space, that's maybe a need for growth, a need for connection, a need for expansion, a need for agency. And I think tying those things to those needs and understanding why those needs exist, that for me starts to feel like a bit more of a stronger motivation. Because also, all of these things are they could be interchangeable strategies, but they're always trying to feed the same thing. And just to maybe just be more clear about why am I talking about needs, is like that whole thing of, if you have a need and it's met, then you get a beneficial feeling or a pleasant feeling, as opposed to when that need isn't met, or there's a need that you don't even know exists that isn't being met, and how that feels, and that unpleasant feeling, and that whole thing of like being in a business and overwhelm and not knowing where things are going and just feeling uncertain. It's like, maybe that's a signal for me. The business is not meeting the needs for you within your own human needs. So that's my sort of partly a nod to the how.
Yeah. And so fortunately for Francis, Mark has added some comments where he's talking about questions here for margin. Money for me means place to breathe and play, which again, like we were saying there, Carlos, about the kind of underlying needs, because in a sense that maybe is talking to an underlying need for kind of feeling for security and feeling for safety. And when you kind of have those kind of feelings based, actually, we are more playful. We are more creative. All of those things, which of course, we are innately playful. We are innately creative and innately imaginative. But actually, the kind of conditions of our life kind of sort of rain down on those things a little bit, actually. And so to create the conditions where those things can flourish, there is a need to feel safe. There is a need to feel secure. And when we feel safe and secure, we're more able to kind of sort of tap into some of those more playful aspects too. And the thing that I was kind of reminded of, which isn't sort of specifically about the kind of money thing, but is maybe a bit more generally about the goals thing, but it's kind of like what you were saying there, it's a very good kind of reminder about kind of connecting to the needs. Because if I think back to kind of all of the goals that I've written over the years, whether they were things for the coming year, whether they were things for kind of sort of series of years. And then if I look back on those or reflect back on those, the things which actually came to pass were the things which actually I did really feel viscerally, that I felt emotionally. And so I've always had in my thing, a financial thing or whatever, but actually, it's the things which I felt really emotionally are the things which actually came to pass. And so then it's kind of difficult to know the kind of value of the kind of specific money target, I guess, in and of itself, versus the thing around the kind of that underlying emotional driver, and knowing those things and kind of orientating more to those things.
Yeah. And this is the interesting bit, I think, around the way we're trying to tackle this, is that my impression for most people, feelings and finances aren't a good mix. Passion and trying to work out profits, they're incongruent, because one needs to be logical and structured and sustainable, and the other is like potentially a roller coaster of emotions and something illogical. And if you are more on that kind of, all right, I'm gonna just think purely rationally, I'm gonna go for just that hyper growth and this need to create a structure, maybe this isn't a place for you. Because I think the kinds of people that we want to talk to, and particularly in our community, and they are thinking about the experience of this all, not okay, what's the end goal, what am I going to create, but as I do the work, as I build the business, as I fall and stumble and achieve amazing things, how does it actually feel? How present am I with that actual experience? And if I if you're not conscious about what needs you're trying to meet, then there's a good chance that experience is not going to be pleasant, because the feelings aren't going to be pleasant, because the needs aren't being met.
Mm.
And so if we're not feeling energized and full of vitality, then, like you said, we're not going to be playful, we're not going to be creative, and I don't think you're going to have the persistence and authentic sort of turn up authentically to then talk about crunchy topics like, how much are you going to pay me?
Mm.
I think the tactics and the strategies, the whether the cash flow forecasts and the sort of spreadsheets kind of like helping you map out all the financial needs, having that structure, I think, is super useful, and I think it's really great. But I I think what I wanted to communicate with this is that it's all in vain if you have no sense of meaning around them.
Mm-hmm.
If the money is not giving you any meaningful pull to making it happen, those numbers, then it's pointless. And I think also in terms of the whole business thing of like thinking of it as a kind of a cold-hearted business person who's just thinking purely about how can I maximize profit here. I think there are maybe some people who get their kicks out of that, but personally, and I believe a lot of people listening here, there's something else they're looking for, and there's that kind of excitement, that joy, that feeling of aliveness that needs to be tapped into. And so it's how do they mutually support each other?
Mm.
How can we work well with the very boring spreadsheets because they actually tell a story that is meaningful to us?
And I think you were kind of referencing or sort of suggesting, if the person who is kind of motivated by just the kind of pure kind of financial growth, maybe this kind of isn't sort of the right place for them. I think the one thing that I would sort of say around that is that I remember when I was running my last company, we were having a session. We brought a sort of a chairperson in, and we were having a conversation. We were doing a workshop there with the directors and this new chairman, and we were having this sort of conversation around the kind of purpose of the company, what a purpose of a company is. And this is kind of true if you're part of a company, but it's also true actually if you are a kind of freelancer, because even if you're a freelancer, effectively you are still a company, whatever your legal status is. You are a company. You still need to do all the same things that a company needs to do. You just need to do it on your own, so it's just much harder. But one of this conversation we were having, and we were talking around what the purpose of the company was, or the purpose of a company. And when it came to the chairman, he said the purpose of the company was to generate a profit, which in a purely legal sense, that is what the purpose of a company is. But it has to generate a return for shareholders. But even if you are kind of motivated by profit, if that is your kind of primary motivation, actually the way to get profit, I might argue, is not by focusing on the profit, because profit is a secondary thing. It's a consequence. It's a thing that happens when you offer something useful to people who need it. It's the thing that happens as a kind of consequence of that. So actually, even if your motivation is profit, if your motivation is more margin, it is more money, whatever it might be, actually there is a risk in just making that too front and center, because you lose sight of the fact that it's a consequence. You will only get to that if you have a good sort of positive symbiotic connection and relationship with the people who you will serve. And so, that's the thing that you need to kind of be focused on. And the more kind of front and center the money bit is in your mind, actually that will kind of frame and cloud to an extent the conversations and the dialogue that you have with your clients and your customers. Because if you see that person just as a means to kind of extracting a return, you're going to go into that dialogue with a quite particular frame of mind, a quite particular lens. And that lens isn't really thinking about who they are and what they want. That lens is thinking about what you might get. And so your ability to do good work, to provide good service, to be valuable, to be useful, which are actually the levers to profit, is hampered from the outset. And so I think it is really important, even if you're motivated by profit, to understand that's a consequence. It's a secondary thing and not a useful primary guide, but I keep saying that, so maybe that's important to me.
No, it's great. No, I think it's really important. It's supremely important, and so many thoughts in my head. But we have someone who would like to just join us briefly and share their thoughts. Francis wants to share some thoughts.
Okay,
and
good.
I think, and
But only if
feelings
Becky does
around
too.
money. Only if Becky does too. So I'm going to bring them both in. You don't need to move to a laptop, Francis.
And pajamas are fine.
Pajamas are fine. I'm just going to bring them on. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to have to really edit this well to make it make sense. We come back to I think Mark has probably got his head in his hands going, Carlos, what are you doing with this?
These people are idiots.
Idiots. He's like such amateurs. He's like, no one's going to listen to the recording of this.
But the beauty is they won't know that they didn't want to listen until they listen.
Hello.
Welcome, Becky.
Thanks.
Oh,
Hi.
God. Wonderful,
Good morning.
beautiful Francis. Welcome, Francis.
Good morning. Sorry about the attire. I've just put on like a makeshift clothing that isn't pajamas. Hi.
We are all appearing authentically and as ourselves. Before we get your thoughts and feelings, please, quick intros just to let people know who you are, because shameless promotion time. Becky,
I think you've done my shameless promotion already. Thanks for that, both of you.
I'm sure you can do it better. Well, and you can mention the websites, Instagrams, all that malarkey.
Yeah, not on Instagram, thankfully, but thanks. I'm Becky Takuna. My business is called Courage Lab, so I help leaders and teams to be more courageous in their conversations, in their relationships, in their leadership. So I mediate, as you say, but I also, as you said earlier, I mediate when there's conflict, but more and more I'm shifting towards kind of, I suppose, more ongoing work with clients, like doing a lot of work and helping leaders to become more courageous through coaching, training, facilitation, and doing more kind of culture stuff, I guess, like helping create cultures where conflict is normal and it's healthy rather than avoided.
Thank you very much, Becky. Thank you. Francis, you're really rubbish at the whole marketing thing, so maybe you can just have a go.
No pressure. It's early in the morning. My name is Francis Halaschi. I'm a co-founder of Better, Bolder, Braver, which is a community for coaches centered on marketing and putting yourself out there. But it's different because we very much care about how people feel about putting themselves out there, and also about creating a sustainable business based on being true to what your values are and building around you something that's going to serve you in the long term.
Thank you very much for both of you for supporting us here and just coming up to have a quick talk. But it felt like, Francis, you wanted to share something around the feelings and needs around this idea of money and pricing.
Yeah, I feel a real sense of urgency, and I've done your course. It's great. Everyone should sign up. But particularly after 3 weeks of having children intensely around me, who I love very much, you know, I'm acutely aware of how important it is to create space for myself. So the urgency that I feel, I want to be able to help others identify, even in moments where it's not so raw, so that they can continually focus back on why on earth they need to make sure that their business is sustainable. They need to make sure that all that they're doing is focused on what is good for them. And money is another vehicle with which we can focus our energy and time, so that all that we're doing is nourishing for ourselves, showing up as best as possible for others. So I love it as another language and currency for clarity.
Awesome. Nice. Thank you very much. And I'm appreciating the alliteration in there as well. Becky, did you have any kind of thoughts that came up during the conversation around this whole kind of connecting feelings and needs and intentions and money?
Well, I really love all of that. I did the course as well, your course, and loved it too. And for me, it's all about the feeling stuff. You know, when some people kind of, because I think it's always been my biggest challenge is pricing, and pricing confidently and pricing kind of my value and all of that stuff. And so I'm constantly kind of in some ways working on it and aware of it and mindful of it. And it's getting easier, but it's always that it's ever present, I think. And for me, it's all about feelings. You know, you sometimes get people that just say, just double your prices, just try that. That would never work for me to just do that. Or it's such, you know, for some people they could just do that. But for me, there's so much psychology behind it that there's so many things that are going through my mind around how is the client perceiving me? Is that greedy? Are they thinking of me as greedy, etc., etc.? Yeah, there's so much. It's a minefield. So I think it's complex. And I think combined, the feelings and the finance. I think it's a great phrase, and it's really important.
Awesome. Thank you very much, both. Cool. Any final words? Because I'm conscious that we're coming close to time, but was there anything else either of you wanted to share before we close off?
I think for me also it's about the story, as I mentioned in my comment. So I think it's the ability to kind of confidently articulate to the people that you want to work with in a really sort of transparent way that you've come to a decision about your pricing, you know, with clarity and conviction on what you want to do to serve others, and that what you want to do is foster in them equally the confidence to do their own work. And I think if you can tell the story of your own experience, then they can trust you, know exactly what it is you've come to where you've come to, and understand in that message how you can help them. So that the more confident you are, the kind of meta message and the kind of energy that you kind of you're packaging up is something that then will leave your client feeling a lot more confident about what they're going to get out of working with you. And if you dilly-dally around pricing, it says, I'm not very confident, I don't quite know what I'm doing. And, you know, that's not going to leave anyone feeling particularly confident about what the outcome of working with you is.
Cool. Thank you, Francis. Becky?
Oh, lots of thoughts going through my head. I think a few little pennies are just dropping for me, I guess, because, you know, my work, a lot of it's, I think that it's interesting. I'm realizing kind of some of the alignment, I suppose, in terms of a lot of my work is about curiosity, courage, etc. So getting under the surface, I guess, helping people to get under the surface if there's something they're struggling with, or a conflict they're avoiding, or whatever it might be, or a relationship that's tricky or difficult feeling they're experiencing. And I guess I'm just thinking about that with money, that maybe the power of, I mean, it's something I might start doing more, the power of just being curious. So when I'm spending too long working, when I'm going over the stuff you've talked about before, Ben, a lot about, I can't remember the phrase you used, where you kind of keep negotiating with yourself, and I do that a lot. So it's easy. I love writing proposals and bids and tenders, and that bit's quite easy, all of the general selling bit. And then I get to the price bit, and that's the bit that takes ages, and I keep going back to it, and I keep checking it, and etc., and negotiating up or down or whatever. But maybe it's just something about that, the curiosity in that moment, noticing that it's happening, noticing I'm doing it in the moment if I can, and then just being curious, like asking myself why am I doing this here? What am I feeling? What's the need underneath it? Yeah, and then the courage piece, I guess there's something about just being, maybe experimenting where it's not too, for me anyway, where it's not too risky. You know, if there's already trust with the client, then, or the potential client, then, you know, being bold enough to try and then, you know, start a negotiation rather than, because they can come back. You know, you're unlikely to lose them forever if you go too high.
Thank you very much, Becky. Thank you, Francis. Really appreciate you joining us and sharing your thoughts. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, that was nice.
That's good.
Yeah. And it's even prompted the question, I think, from Paul asking, when's the next cohort for the course?
Hey!
Do you know what? I'm not sure if we know. I think we're still working out schedules. It potentially February, potentially March. But I suggest, Paul, if you are interested, just click on the green button, go to the website. You can sign up for the waiting list, and we're going to be communicating with everyone who's interested in the course. I think for us, it's as really important just to make sure we got the right people on board, so that we can actually have a group that that's going to support each other as well as us teaching them stuff.
Talking at them.
Or talking at them, yes. We do enough of that already each week. Anything to end with, Ben, that you'd like to share with
Phew. I mean, there's obviously so much in what Francis and Becky were sharing in there. One of the things that sort of like Becky was talking about, I think, one of the things that kind of gets in the way of our pricing is we kind of sort of try and do it in a way which isn't sort of kind of natural to us. And like Becky was kind of articulating there, and it's true actually for everybody who would be in kind of Francis's community as well. People who are coaches, people whose work is about courage, people whose work is about curiosity, actually bringing your own attributes to the process. And I think one other thing, because to what Becky was saying, this thing around, when we are trying to negotiate with someone, it's not something we're doing to the other person. So, keep it light, keep it open, keep it conversational. And so it's never like we're just sort of throwing something over the fence and see how they respond. Explore things in dialogue, explore things in conversation. But that's more the kind of just responding to specific things that kind of Becky came up with. I guess my only part, I thought, really appreciate Francis and Becky joining us. That kind of adds a whole new dimension to the conversation. And so sort of really appreciate that. And your point around thinking around the kind of feelings, understanding those, because actually that is the source material for really good intentions. And that also can point to, what role, money as a kind of facilitator, everything that Francis was talking about too. So that's not a concluding thought. That was just about 4,500 words that were somehow loosely connected. And I'll leave you with that.
Nice. No, that's great. Thank you very much, Ben. And what I'll do is I'll pop a link to a little kind of graphic that we created around feelings and needs. And the idea is, the principle is just to give you a vocabulary to work with that I've learned from a completely different space, nonviolent communication, but I found it really useful in this space of money and business. So I'll stick a link into the chat for those of you who are interested. Yeah, it was a little bit of chaos. I was like, other people on the call talking too long, and I need to be somewhere. But no, I think
that was us.
That was us. And that is super valuable. I really appreciate it, and it's always helpful. And it also feels connecting, and that's one of the things I like about this, is to know that we're not alone here talking. And you are, those of you listening, whether it's live or the recording, you're not alone wanting to do this stuff but not sure how, and not feeling a bit alienated by the way most people talk about money. So hopefully we can find a different language for it. A love language for money.
I think everybody's unsubscribed.
I'm trying to think, is there a money equivalent to the walrus of love?
Don't think. Stop thinking.
Stop thinking. All right, stop. All right. Ideas stop now. Okay. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much. Cheers, Ben. Until next week. Next week, we are going to be talking about, just to let you know, who are you helping? And why is that important about pricing? Anyway, that cliffhanger.
Dun, 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 dun. Bye.
Bye-bye.